Hello everyone, welcome to this week's news and community spotlights. Let's chat a little about the Unreal Fellowship. For those that may not know, this rigorous 3-week virtual program is designed for those who want to learn and understand the process involved in creating a game with Unreal Engine. The Unreal Fellowship pairs participants with mentors and offers online support from industry specialists. The combination of instructors help to guide participants through the entire process of producing a functioning game with Unreal Engine, from concept and art style to delivering the final package. During select online lectures, we'll also host industry guest speakers who will provide additional insights into how Unreal Engine is being used in professional AAA game development. Our instructors will guide you towards mastering the following skills: programming using the Blueprint visual scripting system and its integration mechanisms, creating custom shaders that react to gameplay, developing a distinctive art style that unifies the project's visual aspects, producing advanced Niagara visual effects that interact dynamically with gameplay, efficiently filling environments using procedural content generation tools, using lighting techniques to achieve specific atmospheric conditions, and optimizing and packaging games for final production. If you're interested in participating, submissions close on January 31st. In the upcoming third-person action-adventure Eternal Strands by Yellow Brick Games, the world is your weapon. Playing as the young but fearless protagonist Bryn, players will possess powerful magical abilities and an arsenal of magical weapons to manipulate the environment as they take on massive enemies throughout the Enclave, a mysterious lost land that was once the powerful center of magical wonders. Based in Quebec City, Canada, Yellow Brick Games is a small studio composed of industry veterans who are combining their talent and experience to forge this ambitious yet approachable experience. At the core of their efforts is Unreal Engine 5, which the newly formed studio selected to build the stylized physics playground of its dreams. To learn more about the game and the team's use of Unreal Engine 5, we caught up with Yellow Brick Games CTO Louis Tremblay, who spoke to us about their use of Lumen, Nanite, Chaos, the game playability systems, and more. You can find the full interview on our feed. Epic for Indies has been growing since its launch last year, and we're excited to continue to expand the events and opportunities available. There is a weekly Epic office hours hosted every Wednesday, where folks from Epic field questions you may have about any of our services, as well as 2 additional monthly events. Let's Plays, where we play indie games together to showcase work, garner feedback, and just enjoy some time together, and Pitch It, an event where we invite publishers and Epic partners to offer feedback on pitch decks and offer invaluable insights backed by industry experience. This is just part of what's happening in the Epic for Indie space, with plans for more fun events in the future. You can join the community or learn more by going to dev.epicgames.com/community/epicforindies. Interested in meeting some of your fellow developers? Here's a list of community meetups happening this month. Find one near you and enjoy. Let's move on to our ever-incredible community spotlights for this week. Stylized Tropical Foliage by Thomas Maurice is a stunning project that is part of an ongoing series centered around the themes of lost islands, pirates, and hidden treasure. From developing the art style to leveraging UE5's advanced features for complex material setups, it's clear that a lot of time and effort was put into lovingly crafting each piece. Every asset was meticulously handcrafted in Blender, and most of the materials were designed in Substance Designer. Pivots are stored in the UVs of the meshes and accessed via material shaders to simulate wind effects and dynamic bending interactions. There's also an overview video included on their ArtStation if you want to see more of the breakdown, as well as a link to the project directly. Check it out. Cyberpunk Street Fighter by Ida Faber showcases not 1, but 2 game-ready characters fit and ready to land into any action-packed sequence immediately. They went through and prepared them both with facial blend shapes that were tested with LiveLink Face, as well as our very own game animation sample project. With a truly impressive amount of customization available, as well as a full breakdown of each component of the characters, we highly recommend going to check out the original post on their ArtStation for the full specs. Stylized European Cottage by Harley Gresham, based on a concept by Yoki, was an adorable personal project created in Unreal. The purpose of this project was to improve their knowledge of shaders, modular construction, trim sheets, tiling materials, and basic foliage. With a perfect balance between homey stylized feel and an environmental storytelling, we were transported right into the world they were crafting, and it was easy to imagine how this would fit into a greater whole. There's lots of breakdowns of the process available on their ArtStation for those who are interested in learning more. That's it for today's news and community spotlights. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Inside Unreal, a weekly show where we learn, explore, and celebrate everything Unreal. I am your host, Tina, and also, in addition, technically one of your guests today, as well as I have the one and only Dan with me here today. Hello, Dan.
Hello, how are you doing?
Can we make this sound any more scripted awfully? I'm doing great. Thank you for the inquiry.
That is so great to hear. File not
Yes.
found.
We're buffering. Hold on.
Yeah,
Listen,
yeah.
human communication is difficult. But yeah, welcome back, everybody. Today is going to be Psychology of Environment Art Part 3. And you are stuck with Dan and I, the hooligans. We are back again. We have taken over the stream for our own nefarious means. But Dan, for those who may not be familiar with who you are, just in case, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, yeah. So my name is Dan Hutnick. I have been an environment artist for too many years. It's going on what, 20, 18 years, 18, 20, 18, something like that. It's been a long
Is
time.
it?
It's unfortunately. Yeah, so I've been an environment artist for quite some time. It is one of my both passions, hobbies, and luckily also some of my career as well. But I also run the back end of the live streams for all of our community initiatives. So Inside Unreal, creating in Fortnite, build alongs, all of that, fun stuff. So.
Yeah, all that good stuff. And also behind the scenes a lot for Epic for Indies, which was
Yes.
mentioned in today's news. So you all should go
Yes.
check that out if you haven't already. It's a lot of fun over there.
Definitely should. We
Um,
had a guest on just yesterday that was very fun to listen to. There's a lot of
yes,
good information there. So not only is it great networking, but there's also just a lot of really great information for even just people for their own projects and own games and needs.
just good stuff. Good stuff all around. Yeah, so today is, like I said, Psychology of Environment Art Part 3, as you could probably also see above us in the beautiful title there, which implies that there was a Part 2 and a Part 1, but you'd be wrong. No, I'm kidding. You would be right. We'll go ahead and link the previous editions of this series in the chat here in just a second. But basically, the whole idea is just we're going to be talking about the theories and concepts of psychology with building out environments and level design and all that kind of good stuff. Um, Obviously, one of the very classic discussions and experiences of game dev is yellow paint. And there are other ways of guiding players through objectives and getting them towards where you want them to go without having to be so upfront about it. But other times, I mean, yellow paint serves it has its time and its place, you know? So today specifically, in today's edition, we're going to be talking about collectibles, key items, and how to guide players through environments that have these key items or these collectibles available to them. So that could be either in a level that was specifically designed with these sorts of things in mind, or it could be levels that are particularly cluttered or busy, have lots of things going on, and you still want to be able to have that feeling of claustrophobia or just so much is happening, but still be able to guide your player to where they need to go to find the things that they need to be able to find and things like that. So we're going to be talking about that today, ways that you can help guide players. We're going to be going through a myriad of different versions of this, all the way from the most gamey That is my official term for it. It's very professional. Thank you very much. It's coined. Two, the most realistic versions of this as well. Ways that aren't so like obvious that you're in a game. And that could either be through clever lighting, just vague directional guidance, things like that. And yeah, so that's going to be the topic for today. We've covered lots of other things in this series so far as well, including things like color theory, rule of three, building your level for guiding just through like creating a sense of comfort or a sense of dread, all kinds of things like that in our previous renditions. Words are so hard of the series, so make sure you go check those out if you would like to. But to kind of just kick us off in today's topic, I want to talk about collectibles and key items and all those kinds of things. So I'm gonna allow you to also now talk, Dan, instead of me just standing on my soapbox for this entire time.
No,
But
it's
I would
great.
love to hear your thoughts on collectibles and key items and like what those are to you and if they are or are not important.
Uh, they're an obsession. I must collect them all, and they're very important. Uh,
Yes.
yeah,
Okay,
no,
thank you.
collectibles are very interesting because they can serve multiple different purposes. In the extent of like codexes, or if you're like in a survival post-apocalyptic game, it could be like there's stories here from people they've left behind. So they can not only serve kind of like that, you know gamey, like, hey, it's fun to collect things and make number go up and all of that stuff, but they can also be really good for expanding upon a world or adding depth to a world, or really, for me, I find they're also just kind of like a good pace changer and give you a reason to like really sit in an environment. Anyone who has worked on games before and has released a game knows that it both very fun to watch players play your game and also incredibly frustrating, because you're like, that was like 3 months of my life to make that room beautiful, and the guy walked in and went straight to the other door and left, and they didn't explore it at all. And that's fine, that's great, that's all well and good, but it does kind of give incentive for them to be like, no, stop, take a second, look around, breathe in the world, experience what's here. So that's obviously a really good thing for kind of keeping people grounded and staying immersed. Although sometimes it can be kind of immersion breaking if you're just like, oh my gosh, this is so visceral. Then you press a button and a big thing pops up and you have to read, like, all that stuff. So as Tina kind of said, we're going to be talking about immersion a bit here, and I'm going to go a little tangent here, but I promise I'll be brief. Immersion is both great, but also, I don't want to say overrated, because it's not overrated, but I think it's overemphasized because,
Hot take.
well, here's the thing. I'm as immersed as hell when I'm playing Mario on the NES. That game is not realistic at all, by any stretch of the
What do you mean?
imagination. Like,
You're
there's
shattering my
not a
reality right
there
now.
is not a realistic element in that game, but I'm still immersed when I play it because of the world and the vibe and that ability to suspend your disbelief. And while some people, we're going to go back to this with the yellow paint, will sit there and be like, "Oh my gosh, I love this game," and I saw yellow paint, I'm like, "Oh, I hate it. Now this game is terrible," and stuff like that. It's like, if you become aware of a trope, then it's going to stick out to you. That's true in movies, film, game. It doesn't matter what it is. As soon as you're aware of a trope and you see the trope, you go, "Oh, I know that's a trope," and now it's kind of like cliche or whatever. But like, it works, and people do it for a reason. Not
Yeah.
saying that everybody should use yellow paint, but it is a method to draw players' eyes. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be yellow specifically. You can set up rules in your game or world that abide by those rules. I think of Mirror's Edge as a really great example. Mirror's Edge is like a stunningly beautiful game, but like, any
Yeah.
place it wants you to go is going to make it bright saturated red. And when you go there, it will fade away and back to a normal like color and things like that. So that's not realistic. If you were aware of that, it could, break your immersion, but it also is brilliant at guiding a player in a very intuitive way, where they just subconsciously, they don't even really think like, where's the red thing? Where's the red thing? Their eye is just going to get caught to the red thing. They go, okay, go that way. And then they're going to go.
Hmm.
Um, so there was a point that I was going to circle back to, but I like collectibles. Collectibles are good, and we should do this. This also
Good,
is
good,
true
good,
for
good,
not
good.
just collectibles though. Like these things that we're going to talk about apply to, I think Tina said, key items. It could apply to finding resources like health and ammo or anything like that. They could be applied to a wide range of things. While we're going to specifically be kind of like leaning it into that bucket, these tools, methods, theories or whatever, they can all be applied to many, many different things. And while what a lot we're going to talk about is visual here, Tina's already is going to mention there's also other ways that you can guide a player that aren't strictly visual. They be auditory or even just like game feel and things like that. But I will also now stop talking so you can talk.
This is gonna be the whole show, is where we say something and then we declare, "I will now stop talking," and hand it to the other person. Yeah, I kinda wanna expand a little on what you were just saying about how, of course, today we are focusing mostly on visuals, and by mostly, I mean exclusively. I don't know why I said mostly. It just is. We're just talking about
99%.
visuals.
Yeah.
99 to 100% of what we'll be covering today is just the visual way of going across these things. But, context is you can make it come across in other ways, like Dan was saying, through audio, um, especially audio, actually, I feel, whether that be dialogue, sound effects, even just changing music that's going on or adding music, or maybe you had a moment where there wasn't any and now some has come up. Like initiate combat music. How many times have we all run across that kind of stuff? There's lots of ways that you can do this kind of concept, but today we'll be focusing pretty exclusively on just the visual ways of going about that.
Yeah, and I personally wish that more devs would actually kind of play around with the audio side of it a little bit more because audio is obviously incredibly important. We could do a whole show just about audio and everything like that. But a lot of the game is the, kind of visual aspect of it. And as graphics evolve, as games evolve, as hardware becomes more powerful, we're able to fill a lot more visual information on screen, and that means that there's more to parse through. So if anything, actually, these kinds of like goal posting or signposting things like that are becoming more important than they were historically because if you were limited in the number of assets you could have, and I'm going to use like PS1, PS2 area kind of examples here, like Resident Evil 4 before the remake. The resolution on textures is fairly low, so objects are very obvious when they separated themselves from the textures very seamlessly. But it was also completely baked, except for the things that had to be dynamic. So it was also very easy to tell the barrel that you can break versus the barrel that you can't, because the barrel that you can't is shaded and looks beautiful, and the barrel that you can is kind of like glowy, almost like you can just really tell that it's not sitting in the environment. But we don't really have that problem anymore now. Even dynamic elements can sit very seamlessly into an environment, especially with things like lumen and dynamic gi and things like that. It really makes dynamic elements look beautiful, and that's great. But now it's harder to tell, is this just a static thing that I should not care about, or is this a health vial or a keypad that has the passcode to the door that I'm trying to find, or things like that. So we need to find ways to kind of signpost. I saw in chat somebody said some form of yellow paint is always needed. Exactly. It doesn't even have to strictly be yellow paint, but some way of telling the audience, the player, hey, this is something you should pay attention to. This isn't just the world building.
Yeah, yeah. And even in the most realistic examples where maybe you're not adding a shimmer to an item or a highlight or something like that, there are still ways that you can guide your players into knowing what they're doing. Because the main thing we never want to have happen is we don't want to frustrate, well, I should qualify this because there are, of course, games that are made specifically to frustrate individuals,
Mm-hmm.
but for the most part, in general, you don't want to frustrate your players to the point that they stop playing. Like they're confused, they don't know what to do next, and it takes them out of the experience, and sometimes they just stop the experience outright. So that's what we'll be going over today is some methods on trying to help out in those instances. Um, yeah, I think that's pretty much that for the theory of it, as
Yeah,
long
yeah.
unless you have anything you want to add in.
No, I mean, there's more that we'll surely touch on as we'll go through.
No, we
And we
can't.
do have a few examples that we will dive into. This kind of intro part is going to be a little bit more theory, kind of explaining the ideas, the concepts, the different methods, and then we will actually have a few things to show off. It's not just going to be talking heads this whole time.
Yeah, yeah. We'll both be popping into the engine, and walking through, like, giving actual examples of how these different things work and ways that you can set them up. Um, so yeah, we'll go from there. What do we do next? What do you want to get into? Do you want to get into the engine? Do you want to go over? I know you brought some examples as well that you wanted to
Yeah,
chat
well,
about.
I know you had a few things that you had bullet pointed on with the theory side of it. I guess one of the things we should kind of establish, right off the bat, is like some of the obvious ways, or maybe not obvious, more common ways that people use to kind of like signpost or lead a player. Obviously, yellow paint. It's going to come up a few times. Probably will come up a few more times from here. Um, you could also use UI elements, HUD elements, things like that. Um, Making the item glow or blink or shimmer or flicker or any sort of thing like that is another common way for it. And then yeah, some like non-visual things like maybe you're looking for a data pad and the data pad hums or it beeps every once in a while or something like that. There's many different ways that you can guide post or sorry, guide with those sorts of things. But then there's also just kind of like the design side of it. So one of the things that Tina touched on a little bit here, and actually our kind of demos are going to kind of hit on both of these ends. If in a development environment, there's a lot of different ways that things can go, and this will vary from studio to studio. It'll vary from how big the teams are and all of that sort of thing. But in some instances, you're going to go, okay, I am making this game. And in this game, it's going to have these mechanics and it's going to have collectibles and it's going to blah, 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 blah. And that's all established kind of on like the game doc timeline. And then design incorporates those sorts of things, right? Like while the level design is being made, it's like, okay, here's the golden path, but then we've also built this area because over here is where we're going to put a collectible or a hidden cache of resources or whatever. Um, in some instances, though, and this actually kind of happens, I think, more often than some people think, is that you could get like 90% through the developer or the development timeline, and then either like the lead or maybe it's the publisher or something like that says like, you need to add collectibles to your game. It's like, we built this game without any of that in mind. Like there's no extra area where you can go and find something like that. And now you have to go, okay, well, we have these completed levels, we have these completed scenarios, and now we have to put collectibles in there that are going to be interesting to get. And that could be a challenge in terms of making them interesting or also not making them, as we said, blend into the background. So Tina's, I think, examples are going to be a little bit more of just like, all right, we just had to add stuff to this already pre-existing scene. How are we going to make that kind of interesting? Mine is a little bit more of along the lines of like, okay, we kind of knew in the design process that we were going to have these sorts of things and how to design an environment in terms of both navigation, in terms of like sight lines and drawing lines that draw your player's eye,
Yeah,
and then obviously because it's true in almost every game, but we're finding with this psychology of environment art thing that I'm apparently becoming the lighting guy, which has been an unexpected but kind of funny thing. Um, and how much lighting can also be a really good tool in that
yeah,
guiding process as well.
yeah. So you're the lighting guy and I'm the chaos gremlin, as is our place.
One of
This
these
is
things
this
is
is how
not
it has
like
to
the
be.
other.
It's lighting guy for sure.
It's definitely.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I'm gonna throw up a couple of, like, really cluttered, just a lot is happening kind of levels, and we'll see what we can do to help draw the eye when there's a lot going on the
Hmm.
screen.
Yeah.
But Dan's is the one that I would I would argue is the better way to approach, which
It's
is
the
just having
ideal.
this
It's the ideal
ideal
way.
scenario.
But
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
not
yeah.
always you don't always end up in ideal situations, things
Yes.
change, you I think I've already brought this up as a different example on a previous stream or whatever, but like one of my favorite examples of that is like Halo, the original, was supposed to be an RTS and it turned into a first person shooter. And that didn't happen like week 2. That happened like we're halfway done with this thing and we've just decided to shift it and things like that. And you have to pivot and you have to make that work. And so
Yeah.
these are really good tools to make that work.
Yeah. Being adaptable is an unfortunately very necessary part of game dev, as you all know, as
But
everyone watching already knows.
it can be just as stressful as it can be fun though and liberating because I think some of my favorite things I've ever worked on are the stuff that like I had no intent on doing and then it's just like, hey bro, curveball, and I'm like, oh, let's do it, and then and then it turned out really
Yes.
well. So
Challenge accepted. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
Um, one thing I want to mention before we get like diving real deep, pulling open the engine and all that good stuff. I do want to talk about the so to me, I find them incredibly fascinating. I understand that that may not be the case for most people, but we're going to talk about stats and numbers for a little bit here.
Yes.
So, the main thing I want to talk about is some general stats around like achievement percentages complete and things related to players at 100% complete games. Because when it comes to this topic in particular about collectibles and codexes and stuff like that, especially, this is something to consider. So, first and foremost, you need to decide, well, hopefully, again, unless things have gone haywire. But you really should decide how many collectibles, codexes, whatever you find are necessary for your game, the genre of your project, and what you're hoping to achieve with it. And also, you need to decide basically what is information that is valuable for the players that do actively seek it out but is not imperative for the experience to still be enjoyable, even if it's not found or read or appreciated, which pulls us into some numbers here, right? Because let's say you built out some really great, great. I was gonna say creative
They're,
and great,
they're,
and it just became one word.
they're crazy great.
You just some great stuff. You built some really incredible lore for your world, your project, and you decide to split that up through a series of codexes that are dropped throughout your levels. Great. Wonderful. Nothing wrong with that. Except for, do keep in mind that, okay, this is a general one. This goes across several genres. It would vary if you went into specific genres as well. But the percentage of players in general, again, it's a very general number here, but that actually go through and 100% complete by finding every single codex, for example, is less than 3%
I was gonna say,
of players.
should we have asked the audience what they thought the
There's
stat
some
would have been?
other ones I'll let them guess. Yeah,
Okay,
this one I
perfect.
just wanted to pull the trigger on. It's less
Yeah,
than
yeah, yeah.
3% of
Just pretty
players
low.
actually read. And that's, now to be fair, that is counting the interaction of actually like interacting with the codex. So that could mean even of the 3% that have gone through and interacted with each and every single one of these codexes has not actually in reality taken the time to read it. So this is something to keep in mind when you're setting things up like collectibles and whatnot. Again, it's important that it's enjoyable for the players that do want to go through and enjoy the hunt and that whole experience. You can't be too upset if maybe they skip by some of it, either because they didn't find it or because that's just not the type of experience that they're looking for, which is fine. So that's the main thing, is deciphering between what is considered a collectible and, going into my next point here, what is something considered a key item. So going back to the codexes and lore example, There could be lots of tidbits of lore that is just really fun and exciting and is basically you've put a novel within your project. But is that necessary for the game to continue? Most of the time, the answer is no. Now, there could be, say, an article or something that has information that is actually integral for the player to advance the gameplay experience, whether that be because it hints at where a key might be, or it hints at what section of the level the player needs to navigate towards next. If it is something that is actually important for making the game continue, that is a key item. And this is something I'm gonna be like really harping on a bit today is finding that balance between what is considered a collectible and what is a key item. What is something that the player could completely blow past, but still get the full main baseline experience of the game and find it enjoyable? And what is something that you have deemed is actually integral for the game to continue? So keep that in mind as it goes through. Those are two very different things. And designing for those things is also different. Which we'll get into a little bit when we actually pull up the engine and go through some of those examples.
Mhm.
Basically, the short version is for key items, either you want to put them directly in the line that the player is going to be going on at some point, where they are forced to interact with that item somehow in some way. Um, or you make it very, very obvious to the player that this is what they need. This is the thing. That's when you can start adding, like, here's Shimmer when you cross a certain threshold or you're within a certain vicinity, or this item is just highlighted at all times, or things like that, versus fun little collectibles that maybe you need to go scouring around, scavenge hunting for.
And the real difference between these is it's a range of how much attention does this thing draw to itself, right? So it's not like, okay, for a key item, we have to think of it and use these methods. And then for a collectible, we think of it and use these methods. It's more of just like, hey, this is a range of things, and how much and of which you choose just kind of dictates that. So for something that's like a collectible, or something that doesn't need isn't as important, you still want to you know guide the player there to some extent so that they know they can find it and get it. But it can be much lighter, and you don't have to worry too much about, like, oh, this player walked by this thing. Okay, that's fine. It's not like the key to the door that they have to get.
Yeah. All right, so super quickly, I'm gonna rapid fire some stats, and I'm gonna make chat guess on some of them
Yes.
because I do think it's fun, and several of these surprised me quite a lot when I was researching this. And then I'll hand it over to you, Dan, and we can get into your
Let's do it.
topics and stuff that you had brought. So, my first question. This is a pop quiz. Haha, you're
Ha!
trapped here
You
now.
all be graded.
Yes, it's a pop quiz on answers that you were never given the answers to, so you must guess them correctly.
If you get less than 70%, we're gonna time you out of chat.
We're gonna end the stream early. That's what happens. So my first one is if you had to guess, what percentage in general of players do you think actually 100% complete a game? As in, complete all of the achievements, get all of the collectibles available, 100% complete the game.
Am I allowed to guess?
Yeah, of course. No,
No.
you can't guess. This isn't for you, Dan. Not
Well, I
everything's
figured,
about you.
it gives them time to put in the chat, right? That's what this is for. Yeah. No. So I feel like you're gonna come at me with a little bit of like a catch with this, because you specifically said in all games, and that I feel like can
Yes,
really
this is a general, yeah,
yeah, I feel
it's
like
an
that could really
averaged
affect.
percentage.
To me, I feel like a full 100% is going to be lofted by the easy ones, and then really dragged down by like the seriously 5.0s in the world.
Mhm.
So I'm going to be really optimistic. I'm going to say 8%, 8 to 10,
Okay, okay,
but I feel
that
like
is
that's
pretty
optimistic.
optimistic then. It is
I don't know.
that's
There
okay.
are there are the Avatar: The Last Airbender on the 360 games where you can get all 1,000 achievements in 60 seconds. So those also buoy those numbers a little bit too. I'm
But how
hoping.
many people are actually doing it? Just because you can doesn't mean everyone is, and that's the whole point here.
Okay,
Okay.
so we got a 90%, we got a 5%, another 5%, a 3, and a less than 1%, at least on Twitch.
Yeah,
What
and
does
I'm
YouTube look like?
seeing YouTube is around more or less the same stuff, seeing a lot of like 2s, 1s, 5, 6. So, for those of you who said 1% or less, you are correct.
Crazy.
It is
That's amazing.
between 0.3 to 1% of players will actually 100% complete a game. So,
That's
keep
amazing.
this in mind when you are making your collectibles, your items, your things that are placed around, because there is a huge likelihood that a majority of your players may not see or experience all parts of your game. And it's not even necessarily that they're just blowing past everything. Could just be that they didn't find something. It
Yeah,
happens.
I was gonna say, like, you could like, just because it says full complete is like 0.3, you could have like, I don't know, I'm gonna pull these numbers, out of thin air, but it could be like 70% got like 90% of the way there, right? Like,
Mhm.
just because that number seems really small and initially it's like, oh, that's really, kind of startling. There's a lot in the between, right? Most of your players are gonna end up somewhere in that middle.
Yes. So, just it's something to consider when you start making these sorts of things and you're considering placing them in your game. Just be mindful again of what do you consider integral to the experience of the game and what is just fun fluff. That's good addition for those who decide to seek them out.
Yeah.
Okay, now my second question here for y'all is, and we're gonna flip this around a little bit.
Mm.
So obviously, 100 percenters make up a very small percentage of players. However, now, stat-wise, how if you looked at a game's total playtime between all players that have ever played it, what percentage of that number do you think is made up by those 100 percenters?
Oh, that went a little different than I thought it was gonna be. Okay, so you said of the playtime, how much playtime is handled by the
Yeah,
0.1357 percenters?
yeah. Like, out of 100% of game time, how much of that from
And
all
you just want a
players
percentage,
is
like
made
we're not
up
asking
just a
like
percentage? Yeah. How much of that do you think is made up by those players that have gone out of their way to 100% a game?
the instinct is wants to pick a high number, right? But like I imagine it's going to be shockingly low, like 8% or like 5% or something like that.
Are you going with 8% again? Is
No, see,
8% your
I
answer
know
for
that's why
both?
I feel like I need to change it. You know what? I'm going to change it and I'm going to go with 8%. That feels pretty good.
Yeah, very, very new, unique answer. Thank you for that. I would have never been able to guess.
Okay, so we got an 80, a 90, a 0%, and a 20% on Twitch.
Yeah, we're seeing like 25, 75, 20-ish on the YouTube side. All right. Well, it's time for the reveal. You're kind of close in that you're
Really off.
you're off, but it's a multiple of 8. It is 36% of overall game hour time is taken
That's
up just by 100 percenters.
that's closer to what my instinct was. But then I was like, I feel like it's going to be way lower than I expect.
Yeah. So this is where it starts to get into some interesting territory, right? Of, well, maybe not all players are going to be able to experience everything in your game, but for the ones that do actually take the time to go through, they make up a huge chunk of that playtime. So, this is where finding that balance again. It's a balance of making sure that there's enough available easily for those that want just a quick casual gameplay experience, but also if you're interested in being able to kind of cater a little bit towards those players who will be sinking a ton of time into these kinds of games, making that experience for them still enjoyable in the meantime.
And the genre of game is a big thing to consider too, right? Like some games, it is much more beneficial to the design, and in some instances, part of the design to have that implemented. Whereas other games, it's like maybe not as necessary. Like I don't think modern Call of Duty games have collectibles really, because they used to, and they were fine, but it always kind of felt just like a superfluous, I can't say that word, thing to do that didn't really affect anything. And and maybe the Intel had something interesting to say, maybe it was like kind of nonsense or whatever. But again, a game like a Dead Space or Last of Us, or even like an RPG, those sorts of collectibles, world building, things like that. That's much more important for those who want to dig in and really experience that world. So it might make more sense to develop more, or to spend more time and money and development resources on those sorts of things in that. I don't know. Maybe this exists and maybe I'm wrong, and this is absolutely the best way that racing games should go, but I don't feel like I'm going to be getting collectibles in a racing game, right? Like I don't
Maybe.
know. Power-ups, are those collectibles?
Ooh, they're resources. Do resources count as collectibles? Are we the authority on this? Can we make that decision?
We get to make that decision. We get to make that decision.
Oh no.
I say that with 8% confidence.
I'm gonna say resources are different than collectibles,
But if you have to collect
can be
them,
highlighted in the same way.
chat, we put this ball in your court.
Yeah, I relinquish this power. I give it to you all. Do resources count as collectibles? Let us know. Let us know.
I
what you
want the
think.
next Forza game though to have like car manuals that you have to drive over and find, and if you find them, you can read them.
You drive over them.
Yeah,
and
that's how you collect it. Yeah.
I love the realism of this. There's just like a net on the bottom of the car that just catches the manuals as you drive over them.
And then you get the reward of being able to read a car manual, which, I mean, who doesn't love that?
Well, maybe after it's been, dragged underneath a car that's going like 180 miles per hour for however long. But that's fine.
You have to drive and then actually get out of the car, grab it, get back in the car, and continue racing. Microsoft,
win.
call me.
Yes. Listen, we've got some ideas. All right. So, with all that in mind, that context given, all that good stuff. Oh, we're starting debates in chat. I love this. I'm living up to the chaos gremlin.
What is a collectible? We're gonna get all existential and philosophical now.
Are we collectibles?
Yes.
Okay, anyway, so Dan.
Yes, I think we are. Yeah, so I'm gonna jump over there. I'm gonna actually have to be over on that computer. I apologize. This is the stream computer. If you watch the Psychology of Environment Art Part 1, you might notice that there's a very good reason why I split these to two computers, because I tried to do it on one computer the first time and it really destroyed performance. So I'm gonna go over there in just a second. But I want to preface this by just saying, like, we're being kind of harping a lot on this element, and you might also see a lot of other devs either in terms of just like talking about the game, or in like a GDC sort of thing, talking about playtesting and how things that seem obvious to a dev are almost assuredly not to your average gamer. Your enthusiast who like understands the tropes and plays tons and tons and tons, they're going to pick up on a lot of these things, but the general audience don't, right? And you'd be surprised if you're watching this and you haven't actually been in a playtest environment, you would be floored by how easily a player can get lost, or miss something, or not understand what they're supposed to do, or any sort of thing like that. Going back to the Epic for Indies things, we actually had the Plucky Squire dev on, and one of the feedback that they got a lot actually in playtest is that players were just so like they were getting lost and confused all the time. So they added a lot of these helpers in and released the game, and then all the reviewers are like, why is this game treating me like I don't know what I'm doing? Like, why is it constantly telling me what to do? And that is an exact, result of the fact that before release, they people were getting lost and they were having a bad time. And so it's really hard to kind of find that balance of just like, all right, we need to, signpost enough, but also not make the player feel like we think they're stupid or anything like that. And that's going to range, like everybody's going to have a different experience with that. So a lot of devs will kind of go for a little bit more of like the overly cautious route where they will just be like, all right, you can get in this locker, I'm just lathering it in yellow paint that's going to glow in the dark. Like they really want you to know. And while that can be immersion breaking, I think in general, this might start an argument. I think in general, it's better for a player to maybe be like, oh, I wish that they didn't cover everything in yellow paint, versus players being like, I don't know what to do in this game and I'm lost and I'm having a terrible time. Like having a moment where you're like, oh, that's a bummer is way better than I don't want to play this game because I don't know what I'm doing or where I'm supposed to go or what I'm missing. So
If you have to pick one, yeah. I do feel like there is a sweet spot that can be found somewhere in the
absolutely.
middle,
And that's what this is
but it's
hopefully going
elusive.
to talk about, is like some of those ways that you can find somewhere in the middle that's, going to accomplish the goal, but also, you know, not be too in your face or heavy handed.
Respect your players while still guiding them in the intended direction you want them to go.
Mhm. And in a lot of instances, I think the best middle ground to this is to have, you could do it within like accessibility features, and that's all well and good. But for me, I find one of the best things that you could do is something similar to like a Dead Space, where it's like there's just a button that tells you where to go. It never happens on its own. You have to say, I am lost. I don't know where I'm going. I'm going to press this button and get a tip. And I think that those sorts of things are really great. Or like a sonar ping that you can do if you're like, hey, there's something in this environment, there's an item I need, I don't know what it is, and I can't find it. I am voluntarily choosing to make this, kind of uh non-diegetic thing happen that is then going to guide me, but is completely voluntary, and the player has the control over whether or they do or don't hit that button. That's a whole other thing. We could talk about that later. So yeah, I am going to kill my camera because otherwise you're just going to see me all the way back there for in the abyss. But I will do a fun. And oh, that's blurry. So no, I like it. We're staying
No,
like
leave
that.
it.
Yeah, we're
Leave
staying
it.
just like that. All right. Give me a second and I will head over to that computer. Tina, vamp.
Oh no. What do I do? Um, if you hit Shift W when you have your nodes highlighted in your blueprints, it will align them up. You can also do it with Shift any of the movement keys, and it will do the same thing. It will align things. I also learned another thing semi-recently, and I don't know how I missed this one before, but if you select multiple blueprints and then you hit Q, it will align them where the node that is connecting them will be completely straight all the way across. You're welcome. Give it a try.
This was perfect, and honestly, I don't think I could have asked for anything better. But I do love the idea of you just doing this in like a normal conversation at like a bar. Like you just can't think of something to talk about, so you just start talking about how to like
And so I just
connect.
talk about
Yeah,
blueprints.
yeah, how to
That is
connect nodes.
actually, yeah, I mean that's just real. That's just reality. And
Uh,
you can decide what that means for me.
All right, perfect. Okay, everything coming through, Tina? This look good? Got camera
Yeah.
feed? Everything's raw? I have to
Well,
look
we're
over my
still
shoulder.
seeing, are we keeping your blurry photo for this demo? Just
Yeah,
for context.
yeah, because otherwise you just
Good.
have to see. I mean, I could turn it on. You can just look at
Just the
me off
back
in
of
the
your
distance.
head.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
this is fine.
All right,
This
all right.
works. We can see it great.
All right, perfect. If the color feels a little off or anything, folks, I do apologize. For some reason, once we send this over to my stream computer, it like crushes all the values and makes it really dark. So I have like overexposed this source to try to make it visible. Hopefully it is coming through clear. Tina, monitor chat. If anybody's just like, my eyes, let me know and I'll try to change it.
Okay, but only if they say it that way specifically.
Yeah. They're doing like a bad Bander impression. Okay. So I pulled one of the Quixel projects off of the marketplace, and For some reason, I am like convinced that it's some sort of incompatibility on my computer. I was not able to open the example uh, level that came with it. It would just give me an error and then crash. So I've been having issues with this computer. I'm sure it's a me problem. So I went through and built out a little bit of a scene, and like we were talking about before, this was kind of built out with a little more like we knew that we were going to have these sorts of environments in mind. We knew we were going to add collectibles and things like that, and trying to kind of design the level both in terms of the actual design of the level, but also in terms of lighting and things like that. I'm doing this thing where I'm talking with my hands, but nobody can see me, so I'm going to try to
So you're
actually
swiveling the
translate.
mouse?
Yeah, I'm going to try to translate that to mouse movement. But yeah, so I'll just do a little run around. It's not a full scene. It's not actually all that big. If I go too far this way, oh, the illusion is ruined. It's just nothing. Um, just a little mine environment here. And the main thing that I'm going to be demoing with this is kind of how you can guide the player to, you know, collectibles, key items, things like that, using the actual design of the level and lighting. So in here we have a few different examples of examples of examples. Words are
Examples
easy.
of examples.
Yeah.
Well, here, walk us through from the start. Let's go to like where the entrance of the level would be and walk us through the thought process of what the player would be experiencing as they load this up.
Yeah. So one of the things that I'm going to bring up almost immediately because it is a meme and rightfully so. I think it is quite funny, but there is that quote from Cortana in Halo 1 which is this cave is not a natural formation. Someone built it, so it must lead somewhere. And while that is quite hilarious when you're looking at a ginormous metal cave, uh it's also true though. Like it is inherently true. So if let's say we're we're in this game, we're walking down this path. Don't mind the fact that like nothing has collision. Um, we're walking down this path. This was a man-built tunnel, right? So it must lead somewhere. So when we go through here, our eyes are going to be guided by multiple different things. I actually just saw in chat a little bit ago, somebody mentioned that in the Epic for Indies session yesterday, one of the things that was talked about is like sight lines and making sure that things that are important are like basically eye level with the player, because that's where they're going to spend a predominant, amount of their time looking. Like, if you're me, you're going to look at the rocks and see, is there a hole in the map? I want to find a hole in the map. But most players are going to, be walking forward basically eye level. So that's a really great place to put stuff because that's where the player's eyes are going to be. But things like this too also have the effect of here, let me actually use my mouse so you can see it. These lines are also guiding you. Every single line in here is guiding you towards the end of this hall. So, okay, we're the player. Not only do we have the guiding lines, not only do we understand that this is a man-made tunnel, so it must lead somewhere, we also have the rails guiding us there. And we have the contrast in lighting, where we have very warm lighting in here, and at the very end, we have a little bit of a cooler lighting. This is going to go back to something we talked about realistically, I think it was both previous psychology of environment arts, but predominantly in the first one. So we make our way down here, and now we have a choice, right? We have a choice of where we could go immediately. Now we could step in here and we could take a look and go both ways. But even before we directly step in, just at this threshold, we have a choice of where the player could go. The player can go left, the player can go right. You can guide the player. Oh, my real time is off. That's why. You can guide the player, again, with lighting, but also with the simple fact of man-made stuff is on the right. Warm lighting is on the right. On the left, we have some man-made stuff like these pallets and some debris and stuff here, but also cool lighting on the left. So instinctually, your player's probably going to look this way and then go, okay, man-made tunnel goes to the right. This path leads up here. All of these things are drawing my eye. Warm, 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 a little bit of cool, and then a bright spotlight or point light at the end that's actually warmer than anything else we can see right now. That's all going to guide your eye that way. So this subconsciously tells the player, like, this is probably the golden path, right? Because it's man-made, lines are directing you there, it's warm, it seems like a lot's happening here. Now, left does have a man-made option here after you already make that left. But instinctually, your eye is going to go this way. You're probably going to be like, all right, this is the way to go. And then you might have the question left, if this is the way to go, well, then what's over here, right? So let's go back in. And we walk over. We have a little option here. Now this, again, it leads to nothing. Just imagine there was something more over there. But the first thing that draws your eye when you go to this left thing is this bench. And this bench has a light directly on it. And then on that table, I not only put directly in the center this hammer, but I also separated it from the background by putting it on something. And I made sure that what it was on is kind of different color from the rest of it. They're both technically wood, but notice how the actual piece of cardboard is much more uh, saturated and of a darker color than everything else. Everything about the way that this is composed is drawing your eye to the center here. Now, again, if you're paying attention to tropes and you understand how lighting draws and you understand that everything's kind of in this weird like semicircle around this singular item in the middle, you could go like, okay, clearly they're trying to get my, I see what they're doing here. But at a glance, this looks believable. Like there's not, well, I guess I'll leave that up to the chat if they agree with that. But at a glance, I'm not like my immersion isn't affected by this. I believe it and I just want to grab this hammer and go, right? Like that's just naturally what I want to do there. And so that could be a good way of like, obviously this is a hammer. You could make this anything. It could be a note, it could be keys, it could be a tool. That's kind of the way I was thinking of this, is more of like a key item where it's like, okay, maybe I need the hammer to then go and, maybe there was a door that at the end that I had to break down. So I'd have to get the hammer and then go down there and do that sort of thing. So that's a way of kind of drawing your eye to that key item. Is there any notes or comments or anything, Tina, before I
Interestingly enough,
move on?
something else that my eye is drawn towards when you
Go
go
for it.
over there, like especially when you're standing right there where you were before at that kind of fork, that juncture.
Oh, yeah.
I when you turned to the left, the first thing that I looked at was the pickaxe as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that also, I mean, just from how the lighting is set up, like especially from that angle, it is very well lit. It's pretty obvious it's turned towards the player for how they would be if they're walking in that direction.
Yeah.
So even if that wasn't intentional, that would also be a really good setup for a potential item too.
But that's also a really great point too, though, because that shows how you could have the intent. Like my intent was to draw the attention to here, but it could have been Tina playtesting this game, going up and being like, why can't I pick this up?
Why
Right?
can't I pick
So
up the pickaxe?
in theory, this could actually be a problem because I have now drawn somebody's attention to something that I actually didn't really want their attention to be drawn to. That's more supposed to be, like a world building item, but the player might look at that and go, okay, I want this. I can't get it. I must be doing something wrong. Or they're disappointed because they can't pick up the pickaxe or anything like that. So that's a really good example of how you got to be careful. And that type of thing happens in playtesting so often. It is so easy as a designer to be like, yeah, you're going to go in here, then you go over there and you grab this thing and you take it over there and then you're done. And then a player walks in and they're just like, huh? Where do I go? So that's a really great note, and I'm glad you brought that up because that might be something I might want to change. I might want to move where this pickaxe is so that it's a little less obvious, because I don't necessarily want you to try to grab
Yeah, I'm
the
curious
pickaxe.
actually if you don't mind me asking you to destroy your beautiful environment, how would you adjust that um so that it wouldn't come across that way? If like what things would you keep in mind when you're replacing where the item goes?
Yeah, so a example of that I just did right there is that you could just move it, right? You could just put it in a different spot. Or if you notice that you kind of still want their attention drawn to that, you can put it in a different spot. You could even actually use it to guide the player's eye a little bit closer to what you wanted. So I'm just gonna slapdash and haphazardly put this, I don't know, maybe on the wall. Like maybe it's hanging
Hmm.
as like a tool there.
Yeah.
And then we'll go back and play. Yeah, you actually can't even really see it. Oh, it's because I shoved it in the rock. Okay. That
Hey,
that would do it.
sometimes that happens, okay?
It does. It does. Especially when you're trying to do things speedy. Let's try that one more time. Cool. Yeah. So I mean, now you still have that item. I don't know. That still could be distracting. So yeah, changing the position, adding other items, or in some instances, you can just be like, man, this thing's drawing too much attention to itself. Just get rid of it.
Yeah.
That's also another option. Or if it's something that you really like, then you might need to revisit like how are you lighting this thing? What is drawing its attention to it? Do you need to spotlight this a little bit more? So this is a little bit of example. I didn't have a appropriate light source for this, so I just used a fake light. But really, there's just a little light here that I have on to just kind of again continue to draw attention to the item there. Now you would
You
actually
know,
want some sort of model to draw the attention to it, but in this case, I was just getting this done quickly before
well,
stream.
I was about to
So,
say, interestingly, even though there's not like a direct source necessarily of where that light would be coming from, at a quick glance, it's not to the point where it's immersion breaking for me.
mm,
Like I don't look at that and I go,
yeah, and it's actually
where
funny
is
you
this
mentioned
light
that
coming
too.
from?
Yeah, it's actually funny you mentioned that too, though, because over there I have an example where there is a light that makes sense and it's drawing your attention to it, but there's also a secondary light that is not from any real source. Now, you could decide whether or not that's okay. I think that if it's drawing so much attention to yourself that you go, where's this light coming from? And then it doesn't have a source, that's a problem. But a lot of the times it'll be really subtle and you won't even think about it. Which we'll go to that in just a second. But yeah, before I move on, was there any other notes or comments that I should jump on before we
Um,
go
no,
forward?
I think let me double check here, but no, I think
Yep.
you're good.
Everybody believed this. They thought it looked good and they were okay. Cool.
It's believable, everybody.
Great. So another example is actually we'll go back down this way, and it's still kind of leading a little bit based off of what I just said here. But let's say you were in this example, you come this way and you go, okay, follow the tracks. Maybe there was the objective, of the game was, hey, follow the tracks to the, minecart, whatever. This is another example where everything is kind of guiding your eye over there. Tracks are going over there, warm light versus cool light or whatever. And you walk over here, but you kind of have a little bit of this dark area, a little bit of negative space. You can see the doorway. You can see that there's clearly something over there. And there's just a little green light kind of pulling your attention over there.
Peeking
So
through there, yeah.
yeah, so for I shouldn't say for a fact, but the instinct is that this is the way to go and this is the way to the objective, which is currently the out of the world.
My immersion.
Oh no, we were not supposed to do that. But now you go, okay, well I know I'm supposed to go this way, so I want to go check over here. And this could be it's like a glow stick or whatever leading to this, and then the pickaxe.
The pickaxe returns.
The pickaxe. And this is a really good example. Like again, I don't have a light source here, but you could just put a flashlight on the ground. You could even have it where like there was a caver, like me that's currently inside the rock that got crushed trying to get this thing, or maybe they were using it and they, were picking and crushed themselves or whatever. But all of that attention is being drawn directly to that, and it's really just based off of the two things. It's based off of the lighting, the contrast. I said two things. I'm going to say three things, and the pathing that the player has. So they can go up, grab the pickaxe. Cool, I got myself a quest item. Now we can go ahead and continue on.
This does kind of go back to discussions we've had in our previous psychology for environment art ones, where because of the light color, I very much like, even though I know full well there's no NPCs or AI or anything, like enemies or anything in this map, I was fully expecting you to turn around and there be someone like waiting.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, this started off as like, I'm going to build a quick environment for the example. And then I ended up spending probably a little more time than I should have just having fun building the environment because it was a lot of fun. But yeah, I got one more example here. So, let's say we're coming up this pathway here. Again, you reach this endpoint and you pretty much have technically three ways that you could go from here. But two are the really obvious parts. You could look to the left here and go, oh, there might be something there, but then you kind of see that it ends. I would walk over here. You know what? Actually, I will. But there's no collision on that thing, so you just kind of fall through the world. So don't mind that. But really, there's basically two places you can go. Up to the right, to the tunnel. It's drawing its attention by, again, being man-made, but also having the warm light there. But there's also this little ramp that leads up here to the left. And we can go, okay, let's go up there, and we look at it. And here's a few other examples of how to kind of draw your attention to the item. So let's say in this example, the quest is like, hey, you need fuel for the generator, right? So you're going through, you're exploring, whatever, and you look over here, and there's going to be a few things that catch your eye. First off, it's a bunch of man-made stuff in an organic area. If people were there placing items, there's probably a reason that they did that. So that might be, kind of cueing you subconsciously to go check that out. And then on here, we have a few things drawing your attention. One is obviously this big bright light shining onto this object. But the other thing that I did when composing this area is that I made sure to use no red anywhere in this spot except for the item that I want them to collect, which is the red jerry can. Now, I choosing red because the can was red. If this item was blue, then you wouldn't want any other blue things like that. But I'm specifically making this thing stand out by, oops, pressing the wrong button, by putting it on a blue tarp, on a blue barrel, with a blue metal background, with a blue light on it, shining light on it. So it's not only lit, but it's all a separate color that's going to make this thing stand out more than it otherwise would. Now, this might not be the perfect example because it's kind of dull and dirty. If I were making this an actual collectible item, I would adjust that texture so that it sticks out a little bit more. But you may have also noticed when we were down here, there's also just kind of like this faint green light that you can see over there when you go over there. And that is that light that I was talking about. This is just a point light. And they're not really coming from anything. You could absolutely justify its existence by, like, I don't know, maybe there's like a neon moss, or there's a hole in this ceiling that's, cascading a light in there or whatever. But I would argue that most people probably wouldn't even have consciously noticed the green light, but it does draw your attention to that left side. So you might go over there and be like, okay, cool. Here's, again, I'm now realizing going through this, these are all kind of like key items, but this could just be a data pad, right? Or this could be a health kit or ammo or some, or other resource cache. It doesn't necessarily have to be these key items, but this is how the design of the environment can pull your attention. Notice again, we have a lot of these kind of horizontal lines. This line leads you over here. This line leads you over here. These lines lead you up over here. You're having a lot of things that's kind of subconsciously drawing your eye over there, but at the same token, you know that this is the way to go, right? Because man-made, warm light, contrast take you up that way. So again, these are just kind of like those sort of subtle, or in some cases not so subtle, subconscious ways that you can guide a player in certain directions. And as we said before, this doesn't even necessarily be just for collectibles. It could be for any sort of thing. It could be, I'm showing you how I'm guiding the player along the golden path. They're all the same methods. It's just the application that's changing with that.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much it, what I have for at least this part of the demo. So
This is awesome.
any notes, questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, ideas?
Let's see.
Or
Well,
should I
any
hand
questions for Dan that should get thrown in
Yeah.
there? First one, was this made of mega scans? They're just
Yes.
curious.
Yep. So I used the Megascan Scene Old Mine, and then because I wanted to kind of expand this out a little bit more, I also used the Megascan Scene Warehouse, and I used one of the Cliff packs, just to help have more rocks that I could build this all out.
Very
Is
nice.
that a hole? Oh no! Nobody look. Look
I
away.
mean, all these little dark crevices kind of work for a cave, though.
Yeah.
Just put like a little ominous red light up there and scare your players. That's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this all makes a lot of sense. I agree with everything you were saying. I was getting drawn to the same places that you were hoping for the player to get drawn towards even before you were explaining it.
Hmm.
Like as soon as you went to that room, my eyes were drawn towards the green, especially because something that you utilized in this scene is repeating colors as well. Because it was the
Hmm.
same thing with the hallway that led to the pickaxe, right? It was the green lights that were
Hmm.
leading the player that way. So as soon as I saw that green hue, I was already making that mental connection of, oh,
Yeah.
there might be something there.
And that's exactly the point. It's like, people use yellow paint as that example, but the color really doesn't matter. We generally use yellow because it stands out so well, but as long as your visual language is consistent, it doesn't really matter. Is People will get it. They'll figure it out. And like Tina, what you just said there is that exact example. Green lighting isn't necessarily like a common way of guiding the player, but because it was consistent in this theme, like, oh yeah, I've seen this before. It guided my eye. And again, these aren't even things that you may be even thinking consciously. These will just be like the subconscious things in your mind kind of going through.
Yeah. And I feel like that's another one of those things where it's um one of the comments on Twitch here, I think, really nails this in of you're teaching the player a gameplay skill,
Hmm.
which is exactly it. And I feel like, especially in this way, it's done in a way that it's easy to pick up. Like I'm already learning, okay, I'm associating for this project, for this game or whatever, green might be where I go for these additional collectibles or for these resources and stuff like that. And that's
Yep.
something that I just picked up innately from experiencing the world. It wasn't something described to me in a tutorial. It wasn't something that was like laid out in dialogue or anything. That's just something I was able to pick up innately. And that's kind of leading into what we were talking about earlier, where there are ways of guiding your player without being super overt about it. Um, I
Yeah.
love this section. It gets so surreal so quickly.
I just
Um,
immediately back rooms all of a sudden.
yeah. But I feel like it was your teaching us what to expect from your level, from your experience,
Hmm.
in a way that's still like I don't feel like I'm being talked down to, you know?
Yeah.
I don't feel like I'm not getting a huge not saying that there are any problems with tutorials or with things that are assistances, because there's not a problem with that. But whenever you do see some players that say they feel like they're being babied through an experience or something
Hmm.
like that, you can take tools, yeah, just like this to maybe kind of counterbalance some of those situations.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
great.
Absolutely. Yeah, awesome. I do have two little lightning round. They're not even really relevant, but they came up while I was building, and I wanted to just quickly talk about them. Specifically, I'll actually bring over Unreal here for a second, if I can. Oh, hold on. Let me that. There, there. Great. Um, this is just a little pro tip for anybody who's working on environments, especially if you're newer to working on environments and things like that. When I was building this scene out, let me close this down. Let me go to here. Let's change this to unlit for a second so I can actually see where I'm at. Great. When I was building this out, obviously you're going to, have your content browser, your content drawer, and you'll be able to pull things in from there. Um, if I'm trying to find something specific, like a static mesh, I will absolutely use those filters because it makes it super easy. Like I don't even have to go into Megascans, then 3D assets, and then this, and then find that sort of thing. If I just go to the 3D assets folder and turn on static mesh, I'll be able to see every single static mesh in this Megascans, which is super convenient because I just know everything that I have there. But it's also very hard to tell. And I was actually having this issue while working on this, like the scale of things when there's these little thumbnails, and you have to like kind of drag it out and see what it is. Okay, that's cool. How big is this one? Drag it out, whatever sort of thing. I am a strong proponent of the asset zoo. So if you're not familiar with something like this, it's basically just make a part outside of the level while you're building it. You would obviously want to delete this thing if you're ever going to ship it. But while you're building it, anything that you think you're going to be interested in, pull it out onto a sheet, look at it, and if you go like so for this is a great example. I never used any of these assets, so I don't really need to keep them here. And this was a really great way for me to get them out into the scene and be like, oh yeah, these I don't really need these, so I can get rid of them. And it also just makes it really easy to just pull from. Like if I'm building a wall and I'm just like, okay, I got a big shape, it looks roughly like this, I can quickly easy go, okay, here's a big shape, it looks roughly like this, great, pull off a duplicate and then take it over there and place it however I want. I also, at least in areas like this where it's super dark, I'll often build predominantly in unlit and then switch to it when I need to see how it looks in scene. Just a little tip there. And then the last little one real quick is over here. If I switch to the right lighting mode, this is a straight area in this kind of abandoned mine. And the point of this mine is to be a little bit more dilapidated, a little bit more run down. And when I was first building out the scene, you know, I placed some floors. I actually have a really good example of this over here. I placed the floors, I placed the mine track or whatever. And let's make this full screen for a second here. If I jump in, this is ostensibly the same thing as the other scene, but the railways are like pristine straight, which for a functioning railway, you'd want it to be, you know, fairly straight, you know, or as straight as possible. But it really is taking away from the organic and dilapidated feel. And the only difference between, I think I have bookmarks for this. Yeah. The only difference between these two is just the rails. I have changed nothing else other than this piece of wood and these rails positions between these two. And yet just something simple as kind of skewing the rails a little bit, kind of having them, you know, be pushed up a little bit in some areas and pushed down in other ways, just goes a long way to really selling the kind of organic and realistic nature of this. And the only difference in these two things is one piece and a little bit of rotation on some assets. So just a couple little tips when I was going through.
Very
So
cool.
thank you for
That's
coming to
awesome.
my TED Talk. I will now move back over to.
Wait, before you
Oh,
do,
yes, yes.
I have a question for you.
Go for it.
So when you go back to the fork before it splits off to the right and left sides,
Yes.
alleys, pathways, I'm gonna keep going through words until I find the one that I wanted to say and it feels right, and I still haven't found it apparently.
Okay, go ahead.
But I did notice on the right,
This hole.
the golden path, that you also have that red pipe that's leading along the
Yes.
wall, and
Yep.
I haven't really seen that elsewhere. I was curious. This isn't necessarily related to the main topic of today, but I was curious if that was also intended as part of guiding the player towards what's considered the correct, quote unquote, or the main gameplay path here.
So yes, absolutely. This pipe is actually a part of this asset. It's just built in to this asset here. But when I had originally placed it, it was actually along this wall, and it didn't really aid in any of that direction because you can't see it from here. So I actually did rotate it 180 degrees to make it so that that pipe would lead down that way, precisely like you said, Tina. Yep, absolutely.
Very nice.
It's just another,
nice.
again, it's a stark color. It's also a nice line that guides the player, so it draws attention in multiple fronts, both in terms of silhouette and in terms of actual color.
Follow the pipes.
Yes, yes.
Gameplay 101.
Follow the man-made stuff. It
Yeah.
has to lead to somewhere.
It's kind of a trope, but it's a useful trope, and I feel like
100%.
especially when it comes to design, it's okay to lean into tropes, especially if they're useful and functional.
Yeah, exactly. Tropes are it's impossible to escape them. Like they're everywhere, and tropes are really just the language of the medium that people are self-aware of. That's all a trope really is, right? So that's it being a trope in and of itself isn't a problem. It's when the trope itself is heavy-handed or ham-fisted or whatever that becomes an issue. So
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Dan. This was awesome.
Yeah. Thank you. And I will
Really good tips, really good things to consider here. I cannot emphasize how much I wanted to pick up that hammer as soon as you like stopped in front of the bench and actually looked at it outright. It's like, no.
Yes.
I need to hit E. I need to pick it up.
I must. Hey, and wait, let's see. Okay, hold on. I want to test something real quick. Fade.
Okay.
I'm going to see how close I can match this when I return.
I'm ready.
All right, I'm scared. Was it close?
It was pretty close.
Okay, all right.
The position was maybe a little off, but overall,
It's close enough.
pretty
It's close
close.
enough for me.
Let's see. A super quick question here from Twitch is, will you
Yeah,
cover open worlds or have you already done it? We've not covered open worlds
we should.
specifically,
We absolutely
but yeah,
should.
if that is something that y'all are interested in us covering, happy to do so, because I mean, open world is also just arguably one of my favorite kinds of games. So selfishly, I would love the opportunity to build one and
Yeah, and if there's anything that
just go crazy.
that you want to know, any other tips, tricks, thoughts? I mean, as you can see, this is a part 3 of a series that we have just kind of spontaneously jumped into. So there will almost certainly be a 4 and a 5 at some point down the line. So if you have anything specifically like, hey, I would like some tips on this sort of thing or that sort of thing, absolutely let us know. I mean, honestly, I think half the ideas that we've done through this have been from comments and things like that. So
Yeah,
if you have
yeah,
stuff you want to
absolutely.
learn, we're more than happy to cover it.
Another question I want to answer before we move on to the next bit here is how do you think is the best way to make a player like not get confused and understand that they can no longer go back? Like what are some good ways design wise
Mm.
that you can tell the player, okay, this is a point of no return?
Oh, so the question that we've reached the point of no return, or is the question that
Or the
we're
I think
not
maybe they're
supposed to
thereabout too.
backtrack
So
anymore?
let's say I could be misunderstanding this too. So feel free to clarify
Yeah.
in the chat there. But just for me, the way I'm interpreting it is like let's say that in your example that you gave, if you go down the golden path, you went down the right path and then you went through the end of the cave there, perhaps there would be like a sudden drop off and you couldn't go back and explore the rest of the level. So maybe if you hadn't gone to the left first, you may have missed any of collectibles or resources or anything that could have been on that side. What are ways that you would kind of signal that to the player that, okay, before you move forward,
Mm,
make
mhm.
sure you go do the other stuff you want to do first?
This is an incredibly difficult thing to answer because there are so many variables, and realistically, it's pretty challenging outside of a few fringe cases to explain something like that to the player without being explicit and fourth wall breaking. Like there are certain things like my favorite ones, for example, I think it was like an old Elder Scrolls games where you get to a point and it just pops up dialogue just saying, just so you know, if you go forward here, you cannot go back. And like obviously that is about as in your face as you can get. But I think dialogue, really it depends on the context, right? So let's say we'll use that tunnel as an example. And the whole point of this is like, I need to get the elevator to the surface running. So I got to get a pickaxe, I got to get the hammer so that I can get access to the oil and the fuel for the generators, like whatever. I do all of that sort of stuff. Once you get to that elevator and it's saying you're going to the surface, that's a pretty good indicator that you're probably not coming back, but that is an assumption, right? Like I'm assuming that I won't come back here. So you could do certain things where like maybe your player kind of talks to themselves every once in a while, whatever, and you get the generator running and the elevator comes down and it's shaking or whatever, and they might say something like oh, this is in bad shape, I better only use this once. Or like again, that's a little maybe in your face, but it is pretty difficult to be explicit with that, because that is something that you're going, I'm trying to tell you, the player, outside of this immersive experience, a fourth wall breaking thing. So being able to do that in a way that isn't inherently fourth wall breaking is pretty tough. So a lot of it has to come down to just like, again, kind of establishing the rules in the environment, in the game, the way that it works, and then also trying to set up those things where it's like, hey, my goal is to get out of this cave. Once I've reached this point, I'm leaving out of this cave. It's probably a safe assumption to know that I'm not coming back here, unless there's something specifically like, hey, go up to the surface to get a tool to come back down here, sort of thing. I also think just in general, where at all possible, just try not to have points of no return. I know that that can also open a can of worms where players like backtrack forever and then get lost and have no idea where they're going or why they're there or anything like that. So there's,
But if that's the choice that you want to give them, then
but that's also where, again, I think having things like the dead space, again, it doesn't, you don't have to like hold your hand out in a line, draw it or whatever, but like having a voluntary thing that the player can do that says, hey, I'm lost. I want you to just tell me where to go. And I've making that choice. That's also a good way of kind of avoiding that, because then if they want to backtrack, to the cows come home, they absolutely can. But then if they get lost and stuck and it's not an intentional thing and they're just like, I don't know where I'm supposed to go, having that out is a good way of kind of avoiding that too, without
yeah.
having to have points of no return.
That actually leads perfectly into the next question here, or kind of the clarification for the original, where they were saying, like, imagine you entered the pickaxe way and you go back, then you, the player, might go to the right again because you didn't
Mm.
recognize the original way that you were going before. So basically, like, how to prevent a player from getting lost or just going in eternal circles and potentially getting frustrated. Especially, I think the mine was a great example of that, like enclosed spaces with long corridors that connect through different ways. It can be very easy to get lost in tunnels like that.
Yeah. So for me, I think there's a few key points to that. One is, if you're ever going to make them break from the golden path, that's fine and great. I actually encourage it. I think it's wonderful. But make sure that that break in the path isn't also like 15 rooms, like as you saw for
Mm,
that pickaxe, maybe that was a little limited. It's purely for examples purpose, but you go to your left, you go in a little zigzag and you get your thing and then you come back. It's not like I went on this grand adventure and that gave me a lot of time to forget where I came from and where I'm at. So keeping those things kind of brief enough that they're not distracting and making the player forget what they've done, but long enough that it's like actually worth going and doing is big for that. I also, I might actually, well, yeah, I, I can go back and demo this if we need to. I was also very careful when building this environment to try not to have too many repeating styles of areas. You had that really narrow mine that opened up to kind of a T section that was a much larger mine, still, built with wooden things like that, but it was a different shape, different direction, different, scope and all of that. And then that led to a big cavern, which was also now a different environment and things like that. So if you're just like, I'm going to throw Halo under the bus again. If it's like the library in Halo Combat Evolved, where it's just like, hey, we took 5 rooms, we laid them out 10 times on the ground, and then we duplicated them 4 times on top of each other, and that's all we changed, you're gonna get lost. Like, just it's the same thing over and over and over again with very little to distinguish between those different elements. So having things like that, let's say you did need to reuse a kind of mine. Maybe you saw the one that I had there, the small one. That one was really well lit. Maybe the next one is completely, like, very poorly lit. That is another way of distinguishing between this mine and another mine. If I use that same mine duplicated 5 times with the same lights to the same intensity, same color, same length, that's going to be very hard to distinguish. Am I in mine A, B, C, D, that sort of thing. So making sure that you're varying it up enough so that people can recognize, even at a glance, that they at least recognize where they are. They don't have to know like every little detail, but they can go like, no, I've been there. I'm pretty sure I've been there, so I'm going to go this way instead.
yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. A little bit of variance in the corridors helps a lot, and even just changing the color of the lights a little bit. So,
Yeah.
oh, I know I've been here before because the lights are white, and I haven't been down the one that has blue lights or something like that. If for whatever reason you can't add too much variance to the actual environment itself, that's when you play with some of those extra tools like lighting and colors and things like that.
Yeah, and keep it like always keep in mind while you're doing this that the whole thing you're trying to do is get the player's attention. You're trying to get the player's attention to go to a point. Then once they go to that point, you're trying to get their attention to go to another point, so on and so forth. Something that you can do, it's a trope. And again, if you become aware of it, you might be like, oh, that kind of breaks my immersion. But a thing you could do, especially if it's like a linear experience like that, is maybe at the end of one of those long, mine shafts, the light at the end is flickering, right? That flicker is going to get your attention. And then you go down that hall or whatever, and then you leave. And then maybe in the code, you say, all right, make sure that light doesn't flicker anymore. Either keep it on or off. And now when you come back, you know the environment enough because you were there, but it's not getting your attention anymore. And maybe a different light is now flickering or something like that. Like this is like a just thrown out sort of thing. Again, as soon as you be aware of that, that would, kind of break your immersion. But little things like that in small doses in certain areas could be a way of, like, again, just getting that player's attention.
Yeah. Well, I think when it comes to tropes, one of my favorite quotes from a previous lead of mine was that tropes are just tools. Um, because it's true. I mean, it could be tropes for players, but us as devs, those are known rules that lots of players already understand and that can be utilized for our own benefit, depending on how you use them. So nothing wrong with a good trope every once in a while. They have
Nothing wrong with a
their
good trope.
time and place. They have their purposes.
And I want to reiterate that the people that get frustrated with tropes, it's usually the ones that are clumsy, right? Like, I don't think anybody's being like, man, why are all health potions red? That's so immersion breaking. Like, I hate that all health potions are like, that's just a trope that we accept, and it's not a problem because that's just a little subtle thing that it aids in readability,
It's
immediately.
helpful,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's
But when
recognizable. Yeah.
but when you're in an environment and everything looks really great, and then I'm gonna keep hitting on the yellow paint, but then you have this one thing that's just like smacking you in the face, being like, check out this yellow paint. Nobody uses yellow paint, but we slabbed it all over this fence. Like, that's a little clumsier, and it makes sense to me as why people would find that frustrating. But I don't want people to conflate trope equals bad. Bad trope equals bad.
Yes.
is the issue.
Yes. Very much so. Very much so. I'm also realizing I dyed my hair yellow at the perfect time.
No, your hair is sun gold.
Okay.
It's
All right.
different.
Yes. Perfect.
Different.
All right. Well, thank
Actually,
you so
little
much
did
for
you know
walking
that's not
us-
even dye. It's actually paint. She just put it in her,
literal. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Just in case you weren't sure where the host was or where to look while the stream is happening. This is, here we go.
Yep. Perfect. All right, you ready to jump in
Well, thank you
yours?
so much for walking us through that. Yeah, I'll jump into mine now. So mine, I will. I feel like I have a little bit of context that I need to give here. Because you swapped to my screen and it's
This
just
looks like
garbage.
Yeah, this looks like trash, Tina.
Thank you. Oh my gosh.
That's exactly what I was going for.
So these are the assets and some of the setups and bundles from the Quixel Junkyard setup, actually. So if anyone is looking for a good old garbage heap, you can find a really good one with Quixel. They got you. And I mean that so lovingly because these are actually made so impeccably well. Like, it is utterly disgusting in the most believable, best way possible. But so for mine, I will be tackling more the idea of, okay, we built the place out. There is so much happening already visually. Everything is cluttered. There's so much to look at. How do we go about making something stand out when there's already just so much stuff to look at? So there's a couple ways of going about this. I'm gonna go from the most gamey. Again, I can't think of a better word for it. Like,
Yeah.
the best gamey versions or the most classic gamey ways of highlighting specific items to some of the more subtle, slightly more realistic, leave it a bit more in the player's court instead of just kind of feeding it to them sort of way. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just make a copy of this here rock, first and foremost. Now, for my collectibles, I've decided that for my example, it's gonna be one of those, like, there are 12 hidden pebbles throughout this scene, and you need to find them all. Maybe that we won't go all the way to 12. We'll see how I'm feeling. Maybe we will. We'll see. Um, but we're gonna, first of all, I'm gonna just put this into its own folder because otherwise this is gonna be kind of a nightmare to try and find. But so the most gamey way of making something easy to see is to first of all change its color. So if we're just having people find pebbles or whatever, let's take into consideration the scene around us. So obviously there's a lot of dark colors. There's even though there's a lot of clutter, it's consistent in that it's all dirty. It's all dark. Um and it's all over the place. So first and foremost, what is one of the easiest ways to draw your attention to this, similar to what Dan was saying in his example, change the color of it. Throw a color that otherwise is not visible
Dip it
in
in
the
yellow
scene
paint.
anywhere else. Can't do yellow because we've got yellow jugs.
Not true.
Aha, got you
True.
there. So I'm just gonna make a new material. This is not gonna be an earth-shattering material that I'm about to make here. Okay, let me let me clarify first and foremost.
We
This
are
is just to get the
demonstrating.
concept across.
Yeah, we are demonstrating theory. This is not one for one, step by step practice on how you do this on a technical level.
Yes. And the reason I want to emphasize that is because I'm literally just about to toss a color in here and nothing else. So
Not even a normal map?
no, I don't want a normal map. Let's all let's suspend our disbelief
This is
and
an
let me live my life,
this is
okay?
an abnormal rock. Literally.
Yes. So first method is literally just going to be changing the color. So a color that we haven't seen elsewhere in the scene. There's lots of reds, like rusty reds. There's some blues from the barrels. There was some green from the, what'd you call those? Buckets? They're not buckets. They're square.
Uh
Square buckets.
Square buckets.
Help me out here.
I'm trying
Oh
to remember
no, what are they
what
called?
it's currently hidden. I'd have to
The
look at it.
pressure is on. Come on, Dad, I'm gonna look dumb. Help me out here. No.
The Pterosaurus.
Yes.
Is that not right?
And we also have yellow in the jugs that are there, right? So we're gonna pick pink. We're gonna pick a nice, bright, hot pink because can't see that anywhere else in the scene, right?
Listen, if I was in a trash heap and I saw a hot pink rock, I'm grabbing it.
It's
I'm just doing that.
important. Obviously, yes. And that's kind of the point, right? Is that okay, so I feel like I should also emphasize I have the editor pulled up on a monitor over here, so if it looks like I'm just kind of staring out into space,
It'll,
daydreaming, it's because I'm looking at my main monitor.
at least you didn't have to go
Um
to a completely different computer, so it's less jank than that.
yes. Yes. So that's the first one is pick a color, pick something that will stand out, that will obviously show that this item is important. And we're going to do that by making hot pink pebbles. Because again, nothing else in this scene, no matter how cluttered it is going to get confused with this item. It's obvious already that it stands out in some way. So just that in and of itself, right? We could move this to wherever we want, whether it's just directly on the ground here. Where's your eye going? It's going to that
Pretty
pink
much,
pebble.
yeah, pretty
It
much right
doesn't
there.
matter that it's small. That's all you're seeing is that pink pebble. But so that's the first way, of course, is just changing the color. Now, that's not fun. Like, Sure, it's big, but it's just sitting there right there on the middle of the ground. That could be useful for if you have multiples. So again, the example I'm using is now you're gonna go around and you're collecting 12 of these pink pebbles. Consider the pathway of your player. So we have the whole scene here. Let's say the entrance, of course, is over here. It's worth it sometimes to place one just out in the open, very close to where the player comes out, so that they can see clearly, oh, this is what I'm looking for. They have the context given to them of, I'm looking for multiples of these. This is my example of what I'm looking for. So it's okay to have one, maybe even two, that are in slightly obvious, completely out in the open spaces here. Now, I'm gonna not hit the wrong key, and I'm gonna duplicate this, and I'm gonna start moving these around now into slightly more like cheeky hidden spots. Now, they'll still be easy to recognize because of the color, but we're gonna start playing with some other concepts. One that was mentioned earlier that I want to make sure gets brought up again is eyesight. So if we just hop in here and we come in here with our character, we've got good old Quinn here, who I don't know why she seems so tall to me. I don't know if I did something to the mesh when I was messing about in here, but I, she's an Amazonian queen, and I'm living for it. But anyway,
She's always been an Amazonian queen to me.
yes. So
But
her
I get your
eye
point.
level, yeah, even in third person, her eye level is about around here. Is it catching my mouse? I probably should have checked that.
It is.
Yes, it does. Um, so we're gonna start by putting a couple of these collectibles specifically at eye level. And these would be considered kind of the second level of difficulty when it comes to hiding or being cheeky with collectibles. So first level is your context collectible. That's the one that's just placed straight up on the ground here of, oh, interesting, pink pebble. I'm gonna pick that up and put it in my pocket. I wonder if there's more. Next level is eye level. Before people look down or up, they're gonna just look around. So there's a couple of fun little barrels here that we can just start hiding our pebbles in. I'm already having too much fun with it. Already, it's a problem. So we'll put one there. Let's go ahead and do two more kind of around eye level here. And then we'll go to our next layer of difficulty.
Yes.
So the next one, again, keeping it kind of eye level. That one, even though it's tucked away, it's still more or less out in the open. If we come back here, you can still see it. It's sitting there. It's kind of highlighted even because it has that really dark shadow sitting right inside there. So let's find a spot that's maybe less immediately obvious, but is still at that same eye level. And for that, I'm going to find a spot that's well lit, but has other vibrant colors. Because so far everything is sitting on, it's contrasted by the darkness around it. Even this first one, I specifically put it in this section with this darker mud. For that one, it's sitting in a dark barrel. Let's go ahead and instead move this next one. It's still around eye level, but I'm going to have it sitting over here by these more vibrant canisters. It's still and sitting kind of within the lip of that tire there. So it's still obvious because of the color that it is what it is. It's still standing out. It's different, but because it's sitting with other also vibrant objects, this one is not going to stand out as obviously as the one that's sitting in that barrel, for example. And then let's find another good spot at eye level here. there's just so much. There's just so much happening here.
You had to pick
Let's go ahead
12.
and go over to our palace and set something at eye level here. There's actually a perfect spot. I see it already. I also know that I'm moving this object in the worst possible way, but this is just how I exist. I'm sure it's driving Dan crazy at the very least, and I'm not sorry. That's just
No,
this is what it is.
own
All
it.
right, we'll have it. That might be actually hidden. No, it's not. Okay, that works out. It's peeking just barely over the top of the tires there. That is the other thing. You need to decide for sightlines where you want your collectibles to be visible from. Is it something where the player needs to be actively walking around? Is it completely hidden out of view until they get to a specific spot? Or are a certain number of them going to be visible from the entrance to this level? That's what I'm going with for now. Since we're at the first level of difficulty, second level of difficulty, those should be visible upon entering the level. It shouldn't take too much effort or energy on the player's behalf to be able to see where these are. So that's why all 4 of these are visible directly from the entrance to this level. Now we'll go ahead and we'll start picking some slightly cheekier, some more difficult to find places. So after we've done our stuff at eye level, where, Dan, I'm going to throw this question at you. If you're specifically searching for something, you've already walked in, you've gotten the most obvious things, you've looked around, what is your intuitive reaction to do next? Where are you looking?
Well, first one is pretty much eye level, and then I'm going to check the ground first, and then if I can't find anything in the ground, then I'm going to look up.
Yep, exactly. So 3rd level of difficulty is down. So we're going to start putting some more of these pebbles down on the ground, but in places that aren't immediately obvious, like right there at the entrance. I didn't copy it. Oh no. Control Z.
Ruined.
Okay, everybody, that didn't happen. Cut the last 10 seconds from your memory. I require it. So again, these ones are supposed to be a little more difficult. So we're gonna reutilize some of those same theories that I was mentioning before by putting them with other vibrant colors, making sure that they're not too starkly contrasted by what's around them. Now again, there's suspend your disbelief a little bit because I did pick hot pink as the base color here, but we have a very vibrant yellow. That's a great place to put something that's also a vibrant color again, so that it doesn't stick out quite so crazy. I think another great spot is gonna be because there's these really bright blue caps to these jugs. So I'm gonna be kind of coy, kind of sneaky, and I'm gonna hide one of these pebbles right by these bright caps. Yeah, we'll just have it sitting right there in the middle of them all. Now,
This
obviously,
reminds me
both
of
of those are still. Go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say this reminds me of like Easter egg hunting when I was a kid. Like I'm just like checking every
Yeah,
every little nook and
yeah,
cranny to find the shiny little object.
exactly. And that's fun, right? Like it should be. It should be fun. It should be fun for you while you're setting it up, and it should be ideally fun for your players trying to find them all, trying to see where they all are. All right, we're gonna do one more. That's just this simple 3rd level of difficulty. If I click the right thing. Nobody remember that either. That didn't happen. Okay, everything is working perfectly the first time. Every time. All right, we're all in agreement. And then
We
for
don't
this
make
next
mistakes here.
one,
It's a deliberate distraction.
we never make mistakes. It doesn't happen. So this next one, I'm gonna tuck into a dark shadow and just a little bit out of view. So this is gonna be the first one that isn't just immediately visible from standing at the entrance. This one would require the player actually walking in and looking around a little bit, and then it's just barely peeking out in that dark shadow there. Now, the next level of difficulty is looking up. That is the last place most people will look, is up. So that is something that's very important to keep in mind. I personally would never set a key item anywhere above eye level. If you set it down, that's okay, because people are more inclined to look down if it's not immediately eye level. But I would never put something that is key to being able to progress the game up unless you are specifically making it challenging to find, because that is just innately getting really deep into the psychology part of psychology of environment art here. It is not innate for humans to look up. So this is where you can start to get really coy, really cheeky with some of these placements. Just innately, the fact that it's above eye level is going to make it more difficult for them to be found. So let's do that. Let's do this. First one, I think I'm gonna tuck right into the shadow of the roof here. Sitting right on the roof, having it poking through just a little bit. Um, now
And
that one is, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say, and just to preempt, because I suspect we'll probably get a comment or two about this, like in chat. A notable exception to what Tina's saying is like a platformer or something like that, where the whole point is like to traverse vertically as well as horizontally. But yeah, you wouldn't want to do that in like a Deus Ex where it's just like out of the air, like, you know, way up in the ceiling. Unless again,
Yeah.
that's the point and you're trying to draw attention to it. But then you have to think about lighting, you have to think about your guiding lines, you have to think about the scene and all. There's a bunch of stuff that you would really want to be mindful and things like that. But
Yeah. There's a question super quick in YouTube here that I want to answer. By creating assets and designing detailed environments, can one secure job opportunities in the industry as an environment designer? So you don't necessarily have to do either of those things, but I think both do lead to a stronger portfolio. And being able to show that you understand not only how to make beautiful art and beautiful environments, but understand game sense and understand game concepts is going to go a long way. That's my short answer. All right. We're going to place just one more as like a you need to look up. Well, maybe I'd do it over there, but I might do it somewhere in here. There's also this other huge pile of things, but we're gonna stick to the tire pile over here. Mm, 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 mm. Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
I think in the shanty shed high up,
Yeah, somewhere in here.
maybe right on that I-beam in the
Ooh, I
back.
know. Yep, exactly. And just have it kind of sit right there. Right on top of the I-beam. And again, that is also hidden from view from your immediate entrance and kind of forces the player to actually go around the environment and explore a little bit. So, one, that gives them they have to work for it a little bit, but it also gives you the opportunity to kind of force the players to acknowledge the work that you have put in, right? Because if they want to find that, they have to walk around your environment and they have to look around and they have to see all the hard work and stuff that you had put in. So those are the first like 4 levels of difficulty. None of them are particularly difficult. None of them are difficult to the point where I think it would lead someone to just quit because they absolutely can't find anything. And progressing from here is when you would start getting more into almost puzzle territory of it's purposely difficult. They really need to be spending some time in here looking around. And that's when you would specifically find spots that are not only hidden from the entrance to your level, but would require them to go to almost the complete opposite end of the level to see them. So for that, that would be something like over here, in this set of cans right here. Have it peek up a little bit. How low is that? There it is. It's really hiding. Or another great example would be on the opposite side of the shed, somewhere over here. There's no way that they can see it from here. They would have to loop around. I don't know why I'm pointing at the screen like you can see where I'm pointing. Nobody saw that.
At least
Okay,
you're
comment in
visual.
post.
At least you're visual. I had just like a frozen thumbs up, and I'm still pointing around and talking with my hands.
I'm gonna set one over here. I actually think I'm gonna have it sitting with this bucket of chain links. Yeah, because then that way, it's poking through the back a little bit. Don't mind that. Okay, nobody sees that. But that way is also, if they just walk to here, you can't even see it. You have to really spend a little bit of time to see
And if
that.
that thing wasn't hot pink, you'd never find that.
Yeah,
It would be
yeah.
so hard to see. That'd be a little bit. That's a little easier.
Is that a little better?
Yeah.
I liked it where it was before, actually. I take it back.
Undo.
Even though it's poking through just a tiny bit, but that's okay. So, obviously, we can see now, even though these pebbles are bright hot pink, I'll go ahead and go into play here. They're kind of breadcrumbed around. We pop in, we see this first one, we know, ah, this is where it starts, this is how it begins. Context has been given to the player. Then it's easy enough for them to look around, find some of these sitting around, and it has to be from looking around that they go to where the next ones are. Now, obviously, I know where they're placed, so it's easy for me to do that. But for someone who's never seen this level before, even though these collectibles are a very vibrant, easy to see color, it would take a little bit of time for them navigating around to actually find all of these. And I think I actually ended up going to the one that was on the roof very last, even though I was the one that placed them and I knew it was there. So that's the first set there. Now, this is starting at the very gamey side, right? So that's with these being super bright colors, very obvious to find. If you want to see if these placements and stuff hold up, then that's when I would encourage you to go in and now pick a color that is also not as distinct. So instead of hot pink, let's go ahead and change this to, let's do something slightly more orangey. It's still vibrant, it's still easy to see, but it's a color that's available elsewhere in this same level. I think a little more vibrant. Let's do something more like that. Let's go even more. More. All right, we'll go ahead and apply. And now, with that change, suddenly things are a lot more difficult. Because this orange color, as we can see, is repeated throughout this level multiple times. So already the level of difficulty is increased because it's not as obvious, it's not as distinct from what is around it. And if that's intentional, then good. But if it's not intentional, if this is supposed to be relatively easy, or it's supposed to be key items, like maybe they have to collect all of these pebbles in order to continue gameplay for whatever reason, this could be borderline infuriating for some individuals. So something to keep in mind when it comes to that. I'm curious about how it looks over here. Oh, it's not too bad. Now, what if you don't want to play around too much with colors, or you can't play around too much with colors for whatever reason, but you still want the collectibles to be obvious? that's when you could do something like a shimmer. So let's go back into our highlight example. I'm going to turn this to something far more neutral, just like a standard soft brown. And I'm instead gonna make this shimmer. And we're used to shimmers. We've seen that a lot. It's used very commonly, especially for loot or things like that. But that's a great way of adding interest to a specific item without having to alter the colorization of it, the stylization of it. You're just adding a quick little thing that makes it a little bit easier to see. And yes, it also just looks magical, as was stated in the chat there. For y'all can still hear me, right? Dan's very still, and it's terrifying. Just making sure I didn't like totally miss out on something.
No, I'm still here, but my dog is losing its mind, so hold on.
The dogs always. So I'm just gonna set up a quick little shimmer. Okay, first and foremost, I want to mention I'm not saying that this is the most efficient way to set up a shimmer. This is for example purposes. um, there's Fresnel shimmer combos. I'm gonna just do a sign shimmer right now, but there's lots of different ways to do this, some of which are probably, like I said, arguably more optimized or less taxing than this, but this will work. So this is we're just making a point here. All right, we're just making a point. This into these. This will be our rotation angle. I'm gonna keep it at 0 because we'll experiment a little bit just to see what feels good, what plays right. Oh, what's next? We'll need time. We'll need time and speed. So let's get time. We'll set another single parameter. This will be our speed, frequency. I'll just call it speed. We'll set this at like 0.5 just to start with. Then we'll multiply these together. We'll get a mask. Let's get a component mask here. I only need the red channel, so I'm going to disable the green. Let's go ahead. We'll add this together, add that into A. Get a frac going. And then plug that into B or add. Let's get a sign going. And we'll experiment with the color of this in just a second too. This is just so we can see what's going on. Plug that in, see what's going on here. Okay, there's our item shimmer. I don't like the tilt of it. So that's what this first param is. I'm gonna change the direction it's going. Closer. Liking that more. There we go.
Pretty
I don't
good.
mind that. That'll work. Speed feels kind of fast. So I'm gonna lower this a bit. There we go. I like that. That'll work for me. Move this out of the way. Also, the Q thing that I mentioned before, in case anyone's curious. I'm just gonna highlight these. Hit Q. Look at that. It just lines it straight up. How nice is that? So I grab all those. I hit Q. And just perfect line.
The amount of time I've spent just lining things up in the past
I love it so much.
makes that so nice.
I know, but if you just want the tops of the nodes to match instead, that's when you can do Shift W, and it'll just align them all straight up. Listen, when it comes to just organizing the material editor or blueprints, I could spend hours, literal hours doing just that. All right, I'm gonna make another color here. Let's change the color of our shimmer. What's a classic? Give me a color, Dan. What's a classic? This is loot, or this is a collectible shimmer color.
If it's loot, that's usually gold. If it's a collectible, maybe like a blue.
Ooh, like a
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
let's
a
do
nice
that.
sky blue.
Yeah, let's give that a go. Add that there. I think I'll need to multiply this in together because I think add would probably just change the outside color of it, and I want to change the whole. Yeah,
No,
yeah,
that look good.
yeah. It does. Just for giggles, just for shits and giggles. I'm gonna try it with the add too, just to see if I like that effect more. But I have a feeling I'm gonna like the multiply better. Dang it, why do I also like the add? Oh no. I think I like the multiply better though, because it sustains the base color a little more. But the add is still pretty fancy. Okay. Go ahead and apply that. And we'll see how this looks for our collectibles that we have placed around in our junkyard here. There we go. So this makes it far less of a scavenger hunt, right? Um, because obviously they're all glowing periodically. So it makes it much more obvious where they are. But if that's what you're intending, that can be a good thing. So scavenger hunt setup, maybe not a great example for this, but if this is supposed to be something like a resource or something that you want the player to find, then yeah, having like a highlight, a shimmer effect, something like that is a great way to get their attention, even if it is placed out in a very busy, cluttered environment. That'll obviously stand out, even if the base color is something that blends in with the environment really easily.
Yeah, and you can do this where like you have that trigger based off of a distance, so that way it only blinks when you're close to it, or if you're trying to get the attention from afar, you can make it so that it, happens when you're further away and then doesn't when you get close to it. There's a bunch of different
Mhm.
ways that you can handle that.
Yeah, yeah. I have seen in the YouTube chat, usually people would Fresnel sign and call it a day, and I completely agree. But I don't know, there's just something really satisfying about slapping a couple extra multipliers in there. Um,
Again,
yeah,
this is
you
about
can add.
concepts, not exactly how you do this from a technical perspective.
um, yeah, so there's multiple ways of drawing attention to these objects. Hopefully me walking through some of those things to consider when it comes to level of difficulty of when you want something to be easy to find versus something more difficult to find. The last thing that I want to go over is leaning back again into the more realistic side of things. Just gonna delete all that. Goodbye. I
All
could have
that
also just
work.
disconnected it, but no, I believe in deleting nodes. We delete nodes here. So the last thing, and this is for if you're specifically wanting to find techniques that just lean towards realism. You have a scene that is realistic. Would the shimmer be on different phases for each distinct object? They're in perfect sync and it's a bit odd looking. Yeah, I mean, especially if they're different objects, you can change the timing. You would probably set up multiple material instances that are based on different times and yeah, apply them sporadically throughout. That was just because I had the one single material applied to all of those, but in an actual like realistically apply it to your game thing, I would absolutely recommend that you vary either the speed of which it shimmers, you could vary the colors, or just how frequently it does it, especially if you're trying to discern between multiple objects.
And in a lot of instances, those objects are going to be something specific that you're going to interact with anyway. So you can also affect that in like blueprinting, where each one has like a random seed for where it starts its starting position on that wave and whatever. So there's many different ways of doing it.
Yeah. So for this last bit here of kind of guiding players in the direction of something in a way that's more realistic. You're not using colors to fool them or guide them or fool them. That feels like a really intense way to say it. But just a way to guide them. So I'm going to say I want to guide the players towards seeing this pebble, this very flat brown hidden in the rooftop pebble that should otherwise be like, why would they ever look at that, right? Part of that is how you're designing the environment around it. So we need something that's going to guide the player in this direction in the first place. Because there's, again, if we go back to how many people actually take the time to explore, there could be a huge percentage of players that just run straight through this junkyard, call it a day, never even bother looking in the shed. So we need something that will actually guide them further into this direction. It helped the layout as a baseline. I mean, shout out to the Quixel team, actually works out quite well for that, because even if you're walking through, the opening to the shed is in your sight line. They're basically the entire time you're walking through this small level, which will draw your attention anyway. But there's other things that we can also add in addition to that to try to get them going more in that direction. So I'm going to move around just some of the props that are already out here, some of these tires, to almost make sort of a path, a road, almost, one might say, that will draw the eye in this direction to start with. And then we'll go from there. Move this down a little, scooch it over. And
This platform has
maybe
collision,
we'll
right?
move. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. I'm gonna move some of these more vibrant colors over in this direction as well, because again, to draw the eye, just having dark tires stacked up right here, that's not going to grab anyone's attention. That's why you need to add more, whether that be more items, brighter colors, something that literally cuts off their pathway and forces them to go in that direction. Things like that are what you're looking for in these kinds of scenarios. We'll just move that over. See how we're feeling. So this is actually a good example here of making sure that you go back to where your sight line is, because if anything, I feel like I need to shift these over to the left a little more because it actually cut off this entrance a bit. It feels more claustrophobic, maybe less likely for someone to go in there. So the concept is still okay. We're going to move these out so that we make this further path feel more claustrophobic and this more open and inviting. There we go. That's better, because this is already visually, again, with your sight lines, it's cutting off this other path, and instead your eye line is immediately following further into the shed here. So another thing I'm going to do, instead of adding an additional light, I'm going to play around with what's available to me and see if we can't shift things around just enough where we can get a highlight from the sky to come down the roof and just sit right here over this object that we want as the central focus. Maybe shift things around. Maybe even scooch that forward a bit instead. There we go. So now we're working with the light that we already have in here. We're not adding anything in addition to the environment. We're working with what's already in here. The light's available to us, the assets that are already placed out. We're just shifting things around to work with the level as it's already designed. And that's hopefully already optimized and whatever by this point. Because again, I'm trying to show you ways that you can fit these in if you're trying to fit them in afterwards. If you weren't originally designing with these in mind, ways that you can just tweak the project that's already made, that you've already gone through all the trouble of making perfect, to help emphasize these little pieces. So now we have just a little bit of light that's coming down. The rest of this is still stuck in shadow. And the only thing that is highlighted is that tiny bit of beam that it's sitting on, as well as the rock itself. So instead of me just talking about it, let's see how it looks when we pop in with our actual character. If she can even.
She's too tall.
She's too tall. She's vastly too tall for this. Oh, here we go.
There you go.
Okay, now in here, it's highlighted. I think there's more. I think we can do more. We're getting there. It's progress. I can't go out that way because she's too tall. Hold on. Let's emphasize this further. I want to make more light, I think, come down over the front of it too. So I'm gonna have to adjust these sheets a bit more.
While you're repositioning things there, I do want to call out a quick little tip going back to the shimmer that I'm seeing in chat on Twitch, which is a great point, is that if you didn't want to do that sort of shimmer effect in like a blueprint, you wanted to keep it strictly in your materials, that you could use the world position to also offset the shimmer. So that way it's just in the material as well. So it's another great point.
Yeah. Here we go. This is better because now we're also playing with light in that it's the rest of this shed. It's very dark, right? Even the stuff that's vibrantly colored, like the green tarp and everything, the icon of the light there is a bit in the way, so don't mind that. But the rest of this is quite dark, so now the main thing that's going to be drawing the eye is the thing that is lit, that is light. And this works out really well as in addition, I didn't want to say works as well, because that's a sentence. Because this little smattering of light is directly at eye level, and it will draw your eye up towards your last missing pebble. So again, it's playing with eye line, where folks are most likely to look towards. They're gonna look where just at their eye level is first. And then how you can kind of just subtly guide them from there. Using light, I'm going to become the light guy for a second here. Using lighting helps a lot with that. There's audio cues and stuff that could be used in instances like this too. A great suggestion that I saw in chat earlier, a great way to make people look up, is if there's a loud sound or something that happens suddenly. So in this example, like a crow call or maybe a vulture call or something, where as soon as you step into the shed, there's a loud sound that makes you look up just innately to see what made that sound, and you find your pebble by happenstance, quote unquote happenstance. And things like that to also consider. It doesn't have to just all be visual. Movement is another great way to draw attention. So even if you're adding just very subtle animations, either from maybe we could have like ivy that's hanging down from some of these slabs in the roof here, and the ivy is just very faintly moving in the wind or something like that. That movement will also draw the eye, especially if the rest of the scene is flat and is not moving, because it's something that's different. It's something that's changing. That will also automatically grab attention as well. And those are very subtle. Those are ways of doing it without me painting like this particular slab here bright yellow, for example. Like
just draw
with an
an up
arrow that
arrow.
points
Yeah.
up. Yeah.
Big neon sign.
Yes. So those are all the main things when it comes to working with maybe an environment that's already pre-established, and you're just trying to work some of these little features into something that already exists. Those are concepts to keep in mind. They can also be helpful in initial design too. I don't want to say that you can't consider these kinds of things at the beginning as well, but just it's I think that it's something to keep in mind in the example we gave of if either you're adding something in later just because you want to, or it had to happen for whatever reason, or maybe you're just adding things in because you have the scope and the budget for it and you want to. But you've already built everything out. Things to
Yeah,
consider in the meantime. But that's it for
absolutely.
me.
That's it.
That's it for me.
That was great. Thank you, Tina.
Thanks.
Thank you for demoing. That was awesome. That's a good
Thanks.
good examples, good tips.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now I know we've been going for a little bit. I want to make sure we have a chance to answer questions that y'all might have
And I did also want
in
to
regards to anything.
yeah, I also wanted to make a call back. I was reading through the chat while I was demoing, or the stuff I missed while I was demoing, and there was a couple notes that I wanted to hit on. One of them was the suggestion for a plugin called the Actor Palette plugin, which also acts as a asset zoo. That's actually something I have not used before, but I'm definitely going to because I love me an asset zoo. And if it's easier than manually doing it like I did there, absolutely. So definitely check that out. Um, the other one was somewhere. I will find it maybe eventually. You can
It
go ahead.
exists
Yeah,
potentially
you
at
can
some
go ahead
point.
and say something real quick while I sift through this.
Well, I guess I just want to open the floor to y'all in case you have any questions about the stuff that we went through there. It's all very simple. A lot of it's probably stuff that most of you have
Oh,
already like experimented with before or know about. Hopefully it's maybe a slightly fresh twist on some of those, give you slightly different perspective on how to approach some of these. But if you have questions, toss them in there and we'll give them a go.
yeah. The other
Um,
one that I saw, because it came up when I showed that I was using unlit mode, they were asking if that is like a performance benefit. Absolutely is a performance benefit. I do a lot of that, especially in dark scenes. I will do a lot of that in unlit mode. You can also adjust your engine scalability settings. You can adjust your render percentage up or down a little bit too. Especially if you're having trouble, with performance as you're making stuff, because slow computer while you're building stuff can be really frustrating. So those sorts of things absolutely can benefit. One of the things I will say to be mindful though with working in unlit is it can be very difficult to see how light, obviously it's unlit, how light is going to affect your scene. And specifically on that one, there was a lot of times where I was trying to like layer the assets to make like the floor, that I would have to go into lit mode because otherwise they might be like sitting off of each other just slightly that I can't see because they're both the same color. But when there's that harsh shadow underneath it with the lighting, that becomes a lot more obvious. So I will flicker back and forth between those a lot, but I would say probably spend like maybe half to 2/3 in unlit, and then I'll switch to lit to verify or under specific use cases or things like that.
yeah, very nice. All right, well,
Is there any good
I think that's
questions?
pretty much it. I'm not saying questions so far. We're just
That good.
that good.
We're just
um, we'll keep an eye
no,
out. So if any
we had a
questions
lot
come
of
up later,
good ones come up as we were demoing too. So I imagine a lot
yeah,
of address there. But yeah, if at any point you have any questions, if you're watching the VOD or anything, like leave those in the comments and stuff like that. And again, let us know any other stuff that you would like to cover. I saw we had an open world topic there. That's a whole thing we could absolutely do. But if there's any other topics too, like that you're curious about, let us know.
yeah,
Happy to do it. This is fun.
yes, yeah. Love this series. The whole point of it is just approaching level design in a slightly more mindful way, really, is just kind of the key concept of it all, and it's a lot of fun to apply different theories and stuff to how you can make levels and guide your players and make the experience fun for everyone
Mhm.
involved, hopefully also for you while making it.
Yeah.
But
And
yeah.
one of the questions, I didn't actually see it here, but I imagine is something, I mean, I've heard this in the past, that I'd like to say is, again, you know what you want the player to do, but play tests with other people is great, obviously, but also play tests like as yourself and try to just go off of instinct, right? So when I'm doing a lot of that construction there, is what I'll do is I'll be like, all right, I have an idea for how I want this to go. I'll start building it out, and then I'll play test, and then I'll just kind of let myself autopilot and see what I do. And very often I'll find things like a really good example is like, where's my eye being drawn to instantly, initially, as soon as I'm looking at it, where is my eye going? If it's not going where I want it to be going, then I've done something wrong and I need to reevaluate. So that's a good way for those who's especially when you're trying to get used to like these concepts of like how to light your scene or how to compose a scene or things like that. um like really going based off of like first reaction or instinct is going to be your best like way of kind of guessing what a player is going to do, because it's likely that they're going to have a similar reaction. Not guaranteed, but it's likely, and that can be a good way to kind of narrow, like hammer out some sorts of things like that. And also reverse engineer with yourself. Like if you find like, oh man, in this game, I just feel like it was perfect. Like I was always knew exactly where I was supposed to go. I never got lost. I had a great time. I never had to think about it. Go back to that and be like, okay, I've entered a room. What do I see? Where's my eye going? What has the artist done or the designer done to convey this information? And be like, oh, buddy, oh, they did that. That's a great point. I love the way they use that light, or where they put that light, or how they assembled this thing. A lot of that can come from reverse engineering too, which has been huge for me. I did a lot of some of the best things that I've learned have been from just being like, man, I love this game. Why? Okay, let's
Yeah.
figure it out.
Reverse engineering, picking it apart.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. All right, well, I think we'll go ahead and call it there for today then. Like Dan said, if you all have any suggestions for future psychology of environment arts that you want to see, let us know. Obviously, we love doing this series. We've done 3 of them so far already. They're a lot of fun. It gives us a chance to kind of tackle things with a different mindset than usual, and it's a good time. I enjoy them, so we're happy to do more if y'all want to see them. Other than that, for those of y'all who are still around, thank you so much. I know this one's gone a little bit longer than they normally do, just by a little bit, but appreciate you being here. If you missed any part of the stream earlier, that's okay, because we post all of our streams in video format that can be viewed on demand on both our Twitch and YouTube channel at Unreal Engine. You can also find the previous additions to this series in our Inside Unreal playlist on our YouTube channel, because we keep all of our VODs up there. You can go back to several years ago of Inside Unreal. So don't worry, it's always going to be available. You can come back later to watch any part of it if you missed some of it. You can also keep up with us at Unreal Engine on all of our socials to keep up with the latest news, updates, all that good stuff. In case you didn't know, 5.5.2 is out. It was released as of Tuesday, so you can check that out. There was over 130 fixes in this update, so pretty big patch. Lots of good stuff that was in there. Give it a go. Let us know your feedback. Obviously, we want to know how you feel about it, if it helped, any potential bugs that you might come across, ways that we can continue to develop and improve the engines. Let us know your feedback while you test that out. Then the last thing that I want to mention is next week, we're going to be having a show that is specifically about PSO hitches and stuttering. So we're going to be going all over ways that you can optimize your project, things that you can avoid in the first place, really diving in technically to tackle this topic, and ways that you can approach your own projects to hopefully minimize some of those hitching and stuttering issues that you might come across as far as PSO goes. So keep an eye out for that if that's something that you're interested in. That will be next week on February 6th, same time as usual, 2 p.m. Eastern. So come hang out for that one if you're interested. We will be taking in questions live as well. We're going to have on members from the rendering department of the Unreal Engine team that can help answer your questions and cover that topic. It'll be a good one. I'm really, really excited for that one. So come again. come again. We're here every week. We're here every week talking about cool stuff where we learn, explore, and celebrate Unreal on Inside Unreal.
I feel like you've done that once or twice before. I said that
I
line
feel like
before.
I had to.
Well,
And of course, if you haven't already, please also go join the Epic developer community. That is where we keep all of our documentation, our forums, tutorials from both Epic staff and the community as well. Anything you could ever need in regards to the engine is available there. So check out the EDC as well. You were saying something, Dan, and I very rudely interrupted you. What were you going to say?
I don't remember. It was actually the most important thing I was ever going to say, but it's gone now.
Well, I guess we'll have to find out next time. All
Yes.
right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for watching. Thank you so much, Dan,
Thank
for
you.
being part of the show today and making that really cool mind level and walking us through some of those concepts and stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah, we'll see y'all next time. Bye, everybody.
Take care, everybody.